The patio is open if you'd like to continue conversations, but we're about to start the next panel. If you could please take your seats, we can get
Ladies and
started.
gentlemen, we're going to start the next panel. Hi, my name is Zoriana Kit, and I am moderating The Power of Women. The women who will be coming up on the stage are filmmakers in their own right. No, not yet. I'm just going to do a little introduction, anyways. We're just going to talk, settle everyone in. The women that are going to come up on here are filmmakers in their own right. They're directors, they're producers, they have very accomplished IMDb's. But we're also going to talk about their activism as well, which is what kind of defines them here today. Now we can wait until I get the cue to officially start. And there will be a Q&A afterwards or throughout, depending on how it all goes.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We're about to start our last panel of the day, and I'll just turn it over to Zoriana, and she can make introductions.
All right, I'll introduce all our guests one by one. First, we have Kylie Eaton, who is on the board of Alliance of Women Directors. Alliance of Women Directors also has a block of short films on Saturday. Come on. And so be sure to check that out. We have Cheryl Bedford, who is the founder of Women of Color Unite. We have the co founder of Cinefem, Michelle Cantor. And last but not least, Bree, I'm just going to introduce you as an indie film educator. It's not just, but that's a lot. Bree Castellini. So yesterday, Cheryl and I had an interesting phone conversation, and she shared with me some statistics that were quite alarming. And then I took a deeper dive and found further alarming statistics. So hear me out. USA's Annenberg Inclusion Initiative, they did a study where they showed that the top grossing movies starring girls and women in 2023 dropped from 2022. That means the number of films with girls or women in lead or co lead dropped from 44% in 2022 to 30% in 2023. That's pretty steep from 44 to 30. Then the celluloid ceiling study showed that the top 250 successful films in 2023 had only 16% women directors, and there were 18% in 2022. So, again, a drop. And none of this takes into account the subdivisions Black women, Hispanic, Indigenous, LGBTQ. That's just women in general. So, here we are in 2024. And the question is, how do we address this? What are we going to do with this information? And how are we going to initiate some change or solution? And I'm hoping that our women here will be able to offer us and each other some actionable items that we could do. Cheryl, since you provided me with the statistics, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts.
Got it. Hey, everybody. So yeah, so these women up here on this panel and some of the women in the audience, know I'm the person that talks my shit, so I'm about to. Because I really, I'm very much, fuck your feelings, but fuck mine too. It's about statistical analysis. So I'm very much data driven, and we are at Women of Color Unite. And just so you know, we were the first organization to realize that 44% of Black women and women of color leave the entertainment industry after 10 years of experience because they don't hit a glass ceiling, it's concrete, right? So we recognize that around 2018, 2019. And then because of the pandemic, and we had Black Lives Matter, Stop Asian Hate, Me Too, Time's Up, all of this, we saw the numbers go up. And the interesting thing is that I knew what was going to happen, which is a backlash. Because if you study history and if you study social justice movements, there or civil rights movements, there is always a backlash. And you have to sort of steel yourself and be ready for that backlash. So for us, one of the things that we did was we continued having panels where we discuss all of the other isms in Hollywood, right? Because you can't talk about even Black issues and not talk about colorism. You can't talk about women's issues and not talk about fat phobia and or ageism, and let alone disabilities, right? So we continue to have those conversations and inviting executives. And the one thing that I noticed in all of this was that what what a lot of the DEI programs did was it ended up otherizing. And when you otherize somebody, you actually dehumanize them. And so what we realized, you had to get them all in the same room again. So that was one of the things. And then hashtag, what we call hashtag start with eight. So we asked people in the industry to do one thing for 8 women of color. You tell us what it is that you can do, and we will match you with those who need it. So in 4 rounds, we've gotten over 1,700 women of color in 3 countries mentors. That has led to them getting their DGA cards. That's led to them getting their projects funded, distributed, let alone jobs, right? So, and what I'm saying to that is that you have to be ready. You have to understand history. You have to understand, even in the backlash that we've seen with DEI, it's because it became commercialized. It became bastardized. It was no longer about the principles in which it had begun, which was from radical Black feminists and Black men in the 1950s and 60s, right? And so if you study all of that, you will be ready for the backlash. And I think it was Nikki Braylon who called me, and she's like, Cheryl, what's going on? And she's like, what do we do? And I'm like, we push back harder. Do you remember that conversation we had? I was like, we push back harder. And now we're actually seeing it in politics, right? We saw what happened with Trump. Now we're seeing what's happening with Kamala. We know what to do. You push back, like you get ready for it. And I'm just going to say it. What do we all know? If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready.
Kylie, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the fellowships that your organization has?
Absolutely. So thank you. And yeah, Alliance of Women Directors is in a similar place of seeing some stuff that Cheryl talked about, which is there are a lot of intersectionalities that we need to address. As a nonprofit, we were started in 1997, and since then we've come a long way in more representation for women. But within our ranks, there are a lot of other groups that have been more marginalized than just women overall. So we have 2 years ago, I believe 3 years ago, started the Black Directors Advancement Initiative, which has paired our directors with mentors and with coaching and with training and opportunities. This past year, we were very happy to start our Mentor Latina Directors Initiative as well. And similar thing, coaching, mentoring, matching people with resources. That's a lot of what Alliance of Women Directors does. We have about 500 directing members, 100 amazing ally members who support our mission and support our women. And then this year, we also launched the Rising Directors Fellowship, which is 5 of our directors who are going to be first-time feature directors, helping them make that huge step from all of the short films they've done, all the awards they've won, everything that they've done to get ready, hitting that concrete ceiling. How do we help them push past that? How do we help them meet with executives at production companies, at studios? How do we help match them with managers or agents who will take a look at their work, give them feedback? These are really important things that there are so many gatekeepers and there's so much lack of access for women of color, LGBT, disabilities, all of that. There are extra barriers on top of. And so we know we can't do everything, but we can work every day to chip away at how do we make a little bit more access for a few more people. And I mentioned our ally members, and that is anyone can join as an ally member. And I think that's so important that if you are not a woman, there's still so much you can do. And there's a lot you can do to help any woman filmmaker. It's about opportunity. It's about saying, I'll come work on your short for a day. I'll come, meet this friend of mine who works at this agency. There's it's interesting. This is called Power of Women, but I think it's the power to uplift women is what we all have. Whatever your gender may be, we have the power to uplift more women and more women's stories. And we're trying to do a little bit of that each day at AWD, and along with all these other women fighting that fight.
The thing that frustrates me was another statistic that I had read, which is that women's production budgets are as much as 25% smaller than when a man has that type of similar budget, and they're also under distributed, and women are given only a third as many screens as guys. So with all of this is what we do and this is what we can do, and like, who are we beholden to? That, like, who controls that? Who says we have to have a third of the number of screens or 25% less distributions? How do we change those things? I mean, I don't know how many organizations we need and how many, rah-rahs we need to actually implement something like that. And maybe Bree or any.
Cinefem probably has a better answer for that one. Me now? Really fair. Well, so I started Cinefem as a student 5 years after AWD. Don't tell anyone, that kind of dates us, but we looked at the statistics and we saw that I think it was about 1% hiring rate for women directors in the studio system at that time. So hasn't changed that much. But what we decided to do was form a 501c3, and then overcome some of the fundraising obstacles that women encounter, because you can't really get investors necessarily to come in on a project unless you have a proven track record, which it's like the chicken and the egg problem. And so that was the idea. And with the 501c3, it operates as a sort of legal money laundering device, as my accountant likes to put it. But it is. But aside from that, aside from, soliciting donations from donors, what you're doing is you're giving them the incentive to get a write-off, of course. And then it also qualifies you for government grants and other grants. And having, that type of legitimate organization at that time, my early 20s, where students we were able to, get out there and work with different businesses, put on screenings, engage with the public with rough cuts with different benefits, create discounts, all these different functions that continue to serve the filmmakers. So we produced our films through Cinefem, and then since then, as executive director, I've rolled through about 60 projects, feature films, shorts, at least 4 film festivals, lots of projects. There's activist sites, things like that. And what's cool about this is that the whole idea is that it's a vehicle for women with vision, but maybe not the right opportunities or tools to get around the problem. I always thought of it and think of it more in startup terms. I feel like you have to be fluid in this industry as a creative, but also envisioning new solutions to archaic problems, but using histories like Cheryl's describing to really understand the context of what we're up against as we, really create these new tools. So anyway, so at Cinefem, that's primarily what we do is fiscal sponsorship. So women come to us, producers, directors, and writers. And as long as they are a woman key creative in one of those roles, mostly women directors, they qualify. And so they do their fundraising. They're able to work with us for vendor discounts. We help them with venues, all these different things from the script phase into into final exhibition and even distribution. Just support without over promising. We help give support in that way.
I love that you started that when you were a student because so many directors begin their careers as students. We do have some AFI grads in the house. Whereas Roxy, her AFI film is playing in this festival. It got into the festival Holly Shorts. And
Shout out to AFI, year 1993. Yeah, I'm old.
and so when a student short has the opportunity to come into a festival, it's called Ukrainian Dance Movie, by the way, so everyone should check it out. Got to do a little promo for my Ukrainian sister from another mister. Um, when you have somebody who's at that student level and has a film that enters the workforce, so to speak, how do you, as a woman, capitalize on that? How do you take yourself to the next level? And Bree, as an indie film educator in this world, and maybe even anyone else on this panel, how do you navigate that? You've done one, you want to do another one, but you need to up the ante as you grow and evolve yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. And I'm glad you brought up startup mentality because that's where a lot of my experiences come in. Other than being a filmmaker, I've worked for a number of indie film startups. I worked for Starable, if anyone remembers them, audience building platform for web series creators. Now is a biannual indie TV festival. I also worked at Seed and Spark for 4 years, which was predominantly a filmmaking crowdfunding platform. And something that I have learned over the course of the last decade working in this space is that we are doing a great disservice to film students in particular, but also obviously to people from marginalized communities simply by giving them nothing in terms of information, in terms of money, in terms of mentorship. And information is really where I come into the picture. Something that I have been consistently flabbergasted by is meeting graduates from like NYU Tisch who have no idea how to get equipment once they no longer have access to Tisch's resources, who were given no information. I've spoken to film school professors trying to bring crowdfunding workshops to their students, and I have been rebuffed by several of them because, quote, well, the students at our programs are mostly from rich families, so they don't really need the help getting money. And I never know what to say to that because, first of all, what? Just like, what? And second of all, most of your students aren't who I'm necessarily talking about. And don't you, as an educator, have a responsibility to all of your students, especially those who don't have family wealth to fall back on? And so I've been constantly frustrated by this like wealth of craft experience that people get at film school, at film festivals, at all of these places, but no real information about the logistics, about the money raising, about what fiscal sponsorship even is. I swear I have a conversation every 2 days about what is fiscal sponsorship? Is this something I should look at? You should know that information.
How to
We
be
should-
a PA.
yeah, exactly. Like there are so many barriers to entry that are simply information that I find baffling. And so I think to the direct question that you're asking me, one of the ways that women and people in general can help themselves is finding community, because I wouldn't know any of these women and I wouldn't be on this panel if I hadn't simply put myself in as many rooms as possible, starting small at, happy hours after work and moving up through film festivals with my own films. I wouldn't have had access to any of this information. I have an MFA in writing and producing for television. And you know what that helped me do? Write okay scripts. But did it get me a job? No. I am really grateful for my education, and I'm in a privileged position to be able to have taken on as much student debt as I did, but not everyone is in that position. And I think it is crazy that we continue to force people to pay out the nose for as much information as people who pay nothing, and then everyone is still confused and no one has any work. So a big part of the work that I try to do is make education not only more accessible but more actionable, because I want to stop seeing panels where we're just like, you should be inspired by the fact that the work could be made. You're so special. Just keep doing it. Doing what? How do I do it? After we've done it 8 times, what do I do next? These are the answers to the questions that people actually need. None of you need inspiration. At the end of the day, you all already have what you want to work on next, what you're working on now, what you want to be working on 10 years from now. What you need is resources and information. And so thankfully, we have a panel of women who are prepared to do that. We have a whole group of people that could probably give you more information than you currently have, but I think we need to stop this miserly shielding of information and resources because we're worried that someone else is going to take an opportunity from us. I'm not saying that's not going to happen, but I am saying that, a rising tide lifts all ships, and we are not ultimately in competition with each other. The people who put us in competition with each other shouldn't be in charge in the first place.
I love that. I love that. Well, in order for you guys to take advantage of these resources here, I do want to keep this very interactive. I do want people to jump in and raise their hands if they have questions. Does anybody here, based on what they've learned so far from these fantastic women, have any questions for any of them in terms? Yes, right here.
Can I get you the microphone? Well, it's good for people who might have a disability.
Cool. That's right. That's great. I have a question about audiences. A part of changing this relationship with the lower distribution and lower opportunities is this mythology that female stories and so on and so forth have a smaller audience. What are ways that filmmakers that you have seen or that you know of can set out to build an audience and prove in advance that the work that they're doing has that audience so that we can break through this oh, nobody sees female films, if it has a female lead nobody's going to watch it, mythology that it has been disproven. But how do we continue as independent filmmakers to build those and break that structure of mythology?
That's a great question. Who wants to take? Oh,
So I did this movie that premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2014. And I'm just going to say it. And white men tore this documentary apart. And we took it on the road. And I still get asked to speak around the world because of it. The documentary is Dark Girls. So it was the first big documentary about colorism, and it started off within the Black community, and then we went to the Indian community. We went around the world, and nobody picked us up for distribution. So when we screened at Toronto International Film Festival, TIFF, the people wanted to have that conversation so much that the people who were screening after us, our entire audience came and sat down in the middle of the lobby. Bill Duke and Dee Chansonberry, the two directors, were on steps going up, and I was sitting behind them because that was how important the conversation went. The disrespect of the reviews that we got. We had Dr. Cheryl Grills. So for those who don't know, she used to be head of the Black psychologists here in the US. See, she teaches at LMU. She is a badass. They put in the review, some doctor. I was like, okay, there went the racism and the sexism combined. So what we did, we took it on the road. We sold out. We took it to Baltimore. We took it to Chicago. We took it everywhere. We proved to this industry that Dark Girls was relevant. And then OWN picked us up. We're still the highest rated documentary on the Oprah Winfrey Network to this day. We trended on Twitter for 4 hours straight when we premiered. And I still get people who ask me about that. It's still taught in classrooms around the world. So what I say when people are like, "Oh, your content," yeah, but my content will long outlive yours. So fuck you.
But can I just follow up
yes,
because you
absolutely.
oh
I
you
want
just made an excellent point about critics. It's really interesting because I think there's as filmmakers sometimes we get very caught up in the indie filmmaking world or whatever it is we do. We direct, we write, we act. It's so important that women and other marginalized groups are lifted up in these ancillary businesses to the film business. So the film critics, and also at the studio level, when I talk to development or creative execs who are junior execs, but they're women, they're people of color, they're asking these same questions. How do we figure out how to get these, films made or these TV shows made that have these different voices, and there is an audience for it, because just percentage wise, we are more than half the population. So that's wild that people think there's not an audience and we spend the money. And so I think
movies prove it all. That's like
yes.
Barbie proved it. Oh, look at that! And
Yeah. And so I think we want to look at the power of women in all of those spaces, right? So there's a critics association for women. There's, younger people that are coming up in the studio world. I'm very hopeful, but we have to keep pushing them, and we have to get a little uncomfortable when we remind people, like, we're here, our stories matter. If you are connected to a gatekeeper, if you are a gatekeeper, you need to keep that in mind. And there's a million ways to attack this problem, and I think we just have to keep that one in mind too.
did your question? Was there any answer? I know it's a big overview, but like, did it answer?
So you could take it to the audience themselves. I think that's a very tactile aspect of that. Is like going to your audience and kind of busting past the gatekeeper.
Yeah, from schools, because you can get free. It got to the point where we even sold out the Apollo, right? But when we started, you go to schools, universities, places that where your content will resonate and begin building your audience. When I say we did this for over a year, right? And it's that work. It's the work. It's not going to just happen. It's every day. It's every single day. It's making tons of phone calls. It's seeing who wants to see it. But I can tell you, as someone who did it, that by the end, we sold out the Apollo Theater in New York City, right? Like, we went and we're like, we know that there is an audience for that. When I watched my entire audience at TIFF sit down in the lobby to have this discussion, I knew we were onto something. And I'm like, that. And it didn't matter what these white male critics said about us. I knew we had an audience, right? And let me just give you some statistics, because this idea of like we don't know what we're doing or there's no audience. So did you know in the state of California, when a company is run by a Black woman or a woman of color, profits go up by as much as 30%? 30%, because we actually don't need a DEI. We hire the way the world looks, which means employees are happier. They spend more time at work. They take less time off. They are more productive. So somebody tell me, why aren't more companies run by Black women and women of color? Because white trumps green. And I mean that in all three words. White trumps green. Right? Like there's actual statistics even about white women running companies and women of color running companies and the profit they make. And everybody's like, yeah, no, not you. And I'm like, oh, I see you. Because if it's actually about money, if it is actually about making a profit, then yes, we would see more women filmmakers. We would see, look, we already know that a year, when it comes to Black content, $10 billion is left on the table. I believe the statistic for Latinx is between 20 and 40 billion left on the table. But here's, in the disability community, they leave, wait for it, between 400 billion and $1 trillion left on the table. On the table. And yet these people are still in charge. Oh, okay.
I think something that is coming out of all these answers that I think a lot of filmmakers underestimate about audience is what a distributor will do for you. I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had with filmmakers who ask me when I teach a distribution workshop, how do I get on Netflix? I know Netflix has short films now. And the question I always ask them first is, do you watch short films on Netflix? Do any of you watch short films on Netflix? I would bet the answer is probably no. And if it's yes, it's because you have a friend who happened to get a short film on Netflix. I think, especially as people who are historically kept out of these spaces, despite all of the data that proves that we should be running these spaces, we have to stop relying on them as this magic ticket to success, because these companies were not built for us. These companies are not designed for us. And in fact, they are designed to keep us out. So stop relying on these antiquated systems to be your ticket get in, make your own ticket, make your own distribution platform, go directly to your audiences, get in schools, get in front of people's faces so that it is undeniable, and then you don't need them anymore. Anyone who's telling you that there's no audience for this obviously doesn't know what they're talking about, and you should not trust them with your film.
Something that you touched on was representation too. And so part of what women bring to filmmaking is that desire to show themselves or to show representation of their experience that doesn't currently exist. And that's how you really shift culture. That's how you really challenge what we believe as a society, people in power should look like, or, people who represent our communities actually don't. So I think that's a huge part of why, the focus also needs to be on, getting money and getting resources and getting not just your audience, but getting that behind and just really pushing out that content.
I was scrolling through Instagram or TikTok or one of those, and there's all sorts of inspirational podcasters and speakers on there, and sometimes things resonate more than another. But there was somebody that said that people see you the way they need to see you. And that's why some people hate you before they've even met you. And that's why sometimes you're placed on a pedestal and you can never rise to that occasion. The people project that onto you. And I do feel that with the statistics that we've talked about, the dispelling of the myth that we've discussed, there will always be some people in power who will look at women in a way that they really need them to be, the box that they need them to be in. How do we break that? Or do we just go make our own way?
Yeah,
And
ignore them. They shouldn't be in charge. There should be more of us in charge until they are no longer relevant.
You keep your foot on their necks. And you do it all at the exact same time, right? Um, I I am not the person to ask for grace. This country has had 400 years of grace. I'm not giving grace. I'm gonna keep my foot on your neck, and I'm never letting up, because history tells me what happens every single time I let up, right? And so what I mean by that is I constantly bombard people with studies and statistics, because look, my mother as an activist said, you don't know what's in the hearts and minds of those in power. She said, white people. She said, but what you can do is break things down to the lowest common denominator. And what that does is let them know you know. There has been so much what we would now call gaslighting, right? This idea that our stuff doesn't sell, that we don't know enough, and it's perpetuated by the gatekeepers. And so I just deal in statistics. Another one that I have to that I talk a lot about is that when somebody is applying for a job, so they did this and it was a double study. If there are 10 qualifications, white guys apply if they have 3, white women and men of color apply if they have 7, but black women and women of color don't apply unless they have all 10. And then they did a double study that was like, well, why does this happen? And they said, because they realize when a white man walks into the room, they see all of his potential. When a black woman walks into the room, they see everything that's wrong with her, which is why you need 10 out of 10, right? So if the white guy walks in and he has 3, they're like, well, if he has this 3, he can do 4. Well, if he could do 4, he could do 6. And if he could do 6, he could do 8, 9, and 10, right? When a black woman walks in, if she has 9 out of 10, they go, what's wrong with her? So these are the types of things when I'm having conversations with people and trying to get them to understand what bias actually means, what the system actually means. These are the things that I talk about. And I'm like, okay, so when was the last time you hired a black woman? When was the last time you hired a man or a woman or somebody with a disability? And why not? What did you expect them to see? Because we all know within that matrix, of white supremacy and the power of whiteness. I don't call it white privilege because it's not a privilege to be white. Let's talk about what it actually is, and that actually centers whiteness. It is the power of whiteness. So within that metric, the more marginalized you are, the more perfect people expect you to be. And one of the things that I realize is that a lot of the programs set up in diversity, equity, and inclusion actually buy into that, right? It's like they have all of these people who apply for 5 spots or 25 spots, right? Except they keep hiring, the same people over and over again, but they want us to all fight. They put us in a barrel. That idea of crab in a barrel, as D.L. Hughley said, if you don't want me in a barrel, stop putting me in a motherfucking barrel, right? So that it's that problem. So one of the things that we specifically do at Women of Color Unite is I don't ask you to jump through a goddamn hoop. So in our mentorship program, it's first come. Everything we do is first come, first serve. You don't have to prove shit to me. You don't have to prove that, you don't have to do a trauma essay, which is Polo Black Me. Nor do you have to prove that you are superwoman, strong Black me, right? You don't have to prove shit to me. All you have to do is exist. That is one of the main things that began to really shift when I started Women of Color Unite. That was one of the main things that we wanted to do. I don't want anybody marginalized to feel like they have to be perfect, because then go read a study from the National Institute of Health and you will see the damage that it does to the mental health of those that you are making jump through hoops. I'm not jumping through your hoops. Fuck your crumbs. I want the whole goddamn pie.
Does anyone have other questions? Yeah. Yes. And then we'll go to you. Oh, yes, go ahead. We'll get to both of you.
Cheryl, I remember you posting the trauma porn comment on Twitter. And I'm gonna tell you, I've been in a fellowship program since 2019, back to back. I've done 6 years of fellowship programs, and I would say the first set of rejections after pouring your trauma in there is so mentally exhausting, and then constantly doing fellowship programs and not breaking through is also taxing on your mental health. Um, so I'm just curious to know, the panel suggestions on mental health, because some of us have been pursuing this for more than 10 years, 15 years, almost 15 years for me, still have not gotten the first big break. But I'm trying to stay in there and stay sane after literally trying to be undeniable, because that's what I was told I needed to be undeniable.
You don't. So
Oh, I know.
you remember I got blocked? Do you remember how many people blocked me that I ended up arguing with? And they were people, marginalized people, who had gotten into those programs. And I'm like, yes, but what about the other 5,000 that didn't? Now, let's say 2,500 of them suck, right? Like, we'll just do that. But if you take the average and above, what does that do every single time that you have to apply? And honestly, the only thing that I can say is that we'll just keep trying to lead by example, right? At Women of Color Unite. And anybody who's ever applied for Start with 8 knows all you got to do is make it on time, because we take it for it's 8 times as many mentors as we get. We fill up, we shut it down, right? It's just first come, first serve. And so I just hope that others follow our lead and realize when we look at DEI and what has actually happened to it, this industry has actually been at fault for partly for what has happened to it, right? Like it and I just real quick want to say, when we saw what was happening with that, we don't actually call it DEI where at Women of Color Unite, we actually changed it years ago. We call it depth of knowledge, DOC, right? Because that's what you're talking about. You're talking about a depth of knowledge, of understanding social justice, everything that I said before, and it's head by Dr. Akosua is saying, you can't find DEI. Because we saw where it was going, right? And that's the problem. What you're talking about was why it was actually always going to fail. because of exactly the thing that you're talking about. And that's the thing with history, with understanding and understanding why it was always going to fail.
Stay in, stay in. Don't leave.
And
Don't
also
give
find
up.
communities. Don't suffer alone. Find other people in those positions. Join organizations that are built for you. And they may not be able to give you a practical leg up now, but don't do it in silence. And remember every single day to find one thing that still really matters to you about the work that you make and the work that you want to make, and just keep that as your gold star. It's not every day is not going to be great, obviously. Even when you have a great success, it may not lead to something else, but what is it leading to? Try to live in that moment while you're still fighting the good fight, and definitely surround yourself with great people.
Hi, my name is Victoria Bermudez. I'm a NYC based actress, and thank you for all of your words today. Very inspiring. To piggyback off what she said, navigating a career in film can be challenging, especially when facing unique hurdles that come with being a woman, i.e., periods, hormones, um, the desire to want to start a family or raise your family. How do you manage these challenges while striving for success in this industry?
I'll go because I did just start a family. I have a 18-month-old, so your question really resonates with me. And those are additional challenges that we face, and sometimes aren't maybe the headline issues, but I have to pay a babysitter to be here right now, so that's an extra financial hurdle. I think you have to find very similar to what was just said. Find a tribe of people that you can help each other out, because again, it's hard outside of women to find that help sometime, but we know how to help ourselves best. I think that it's really hard to balance those desires with career desires, and I face that every day, and I'm sure everyone up here has their own version of that. But I commend you for staying in it and keeping at it. I think that's the one thing you have to remind yourself is, I can't speak to hormones because I was on fertility drugs for 2 years, so Lord knows what I said in those 2 years, and I apologize to anyone about that. But it's in terms of being a woman, and periods, complain about it, and if guys don't want to hear it, then it's 2024. Sorry if they're uncomfortable about that, but you're doing the right thing. You're showing up, you're asking questions. Find that community that can help you out, and don't give up on one dream or the other. I think having it all is a myth, but I think that we can work to find the things that are really important to us. So yeah, thank you for your question.
I was working from home or work from home mom, and kept Cinefem going. And it was always my well, I'm getting out of the industry. It was right after school too. So I was very concerned, and it was just sort of a way to kind of keep my foot in. And I've worked a million other different jobs that did not relate to film. If you have an MFA in California, you can be a paralegal, by the way, and be trained. So there's a lot of different side hustles that you can do. But I mean, that's the age old question, right? Is how do you balance that? But
I would say, because I have not started a family yet, but my best advice is to ask that question to a panel of men, because I don't think they get that question enough. And men have just as many, if not more, hormones than women. They're just different hormones, and they're way more destructive. And also, just as many of those men have children as women do. So I think we should start interrogating men about, hey, why aren't you at home with the kids? Why aren't who is doing the unseen labor to allow you to gallivant around the world? Why do you get to have it all, but then women get asked about why they can't have it all while they're doing all of your work? So I implore all of you to ask the same questions of women and men, and especially ask the questions that most often get asked to women to men, because they should be accountable for that too. They should be thinking about it, and maybe it will even open their minds to questions that they should be asking, not only themselves, but the women in their lives.
I think that last night at the opening night festivities, I saw a woman who was in the lobby with a little pram. There was a baby in there, and I'm like, "That's it. That's your childcare answer, right? You bring the baby to the party." So
well, things have changed. I remember being at the Santa Monica Playground and I was trying to write a web series. I was like, okay, I'm going to, make a music video. I did every single little thing I could to get back into the industry, having, like raised my kid through whatever age. And I remember being at like writing this cool, show about mommy dating, and I had all the characters. And I remember like looking it up. We were about to shoot it, and somebody else had already done the web series down to like some of the same names, but it goes to show you that things change really quickly. And I've seen just in the last 10 years last 5 years how many different types of representation women, like you see it in TV, how you have like more content of women, moms being bad and all the great stuff we really want to see, right? Come on, ladies. Yeah, so anyway, again, it's just like make whatever you can, make it about you, get your shit out there, get help, talk to amazing people like Cheryl Bedford, give woke you money. Okay, like I'm serious. Like that's how we make change. We fund organizations like Woke You who really help women on the boots.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't know. I've never been married. I don't have any kids, so I have disposable income. Um, but what I will
What a
say,
panel just on that. Sign me up.
just to talk about that, that would be
Save
adults
for the
only.
dinner show, you
Adults
guys. Come
only.
on.
No. But what I will say is this: that we are expected as women to go above and beyond, right? Like I mean, they're even statistically, as far as divorces go, is because most of the time it's because they don't help out at how in the house, right? So women have to go to work and so forth and so on. But there was one thing that you did say that I recently saw from a sociologist, and I really want people to think about that. And that's this idea of women being hormonal, even you said it, or being overly emotional. And what the sociologist said was that the quote unquote logical side of our brain, that is the brain that actually has language and it moves very, very quickly. That is our conscious. Our subconscious is actually our emotions. It is actually the smarter part because it's taking in everything else around us. It just doesn't have the language. So it takes a little longer for us to process it because that side of us, it's taking in everything. It's not just taking in the facts in front of us, it's taking in just everything around that truly makes a good decision. So there is this idea that somehow women were more emotional. Well, yeah, we're more empathetic, we're more in tune to our subconscious, but that's what it actually is. And it's not that our emotions are actually less logical, they're actually more so because they're taking in more information. It just takes longer to process it. Just remember that.
I also think that you should let yourself go with the flow in terms of those things, the life changes that come with being a woman. There are so many markers in a woman's life, like having children, a divorce, things when major milestones like that happen, good or bad, it does change our perspective on things, and it introduces a new way of thinking, maybe a new way of looking at things. When I had kids, then all of a sudden my value system changed, and that informed me how I went on in life. When I became a single mom, I had to think creatively because I had to support two kids on my own. And that led me down a completely other interesting career path. And none of those things would have happened had I not chosen to engage in those milestones that had nothing to do with my career when those decisions were made. So don't be afraid, because they they can lead you down some pretty beautiful paths, or creative paths as well, is what I would say. Now we have 10 minutes left, and I do want, yeah, you have the mic, and then there's somebody else over there that will need it after.
Hi, I'm Marie Francoise Theodore, and I just wanted to say hi to Cheryl and
Hey.
Kylie. I was in her film Dispel, and I'm a member of Woku, and I just got my Start with 8 mentor, and I'm going to be starting making my own films again. So I'm really excited about that. Um, I just wanted to say that it's really important. Woku has been really instrumental in me staying in the industry during times when I really thought it just isn't for me anymore. That my values were not the values, it seemed, of the industry. But then when you are able to connect with like-minded women and people who support women and our vision and our work, it really inspires you to keep going. And I'm even getting so much inspiration from the Olympics for the first time since I was a kid by how the women are really supporting even their competitors. And I competing really hard and then still celebrating each other. So I think that's really important. And just to say really quickly about the whole motherhood thing, because I did that, really choose your mate wisely.
Yes,
That's number
yes.
one.
I second that.
Really vet him, and your life will be a lot better.
The Gen
That's all I
Zs, you
can
guys
say.
have the internet. You guys have everything at your fingertips. I did not.
Research him, do that Google search, all of it. Just make sure you're with the right guy. Otherwise, life is rough. Anyway, who's next?
Hi, I'm Karoli Remlinger. I am mental expert for professional athletes and people working in entertainment business. And I would love to come back to some statistics that Cheryl shared with us. In corporate world, this is proven statistically that if a man sees a job description and he matches 25%, he goes for it. A woman, if she sees that she is only 90%, she will not go for the job because she thinks she doesn't match the job description. So the thing is that what we have to do is to teach little girls and ladies that it's fine not to be 10 out of 10, that it is fine to be 3, to be 4, because you don't have to have all the skills. You don't have to have everything right now because everything is easy to learn. And later, if you want one day to have huge business, you will not run anything on your own anyway. You will have experts in legal department, in HR, in IT. You don't have to do it alone. So thank you so much for empowering women to just go do their shit and don't give up. Thank you.
Nice. Nice. And before we let everybody go, do you guys have any last words of insight or advice to our audience members before we wrap it up?
If anyone's running a crowdfunding campaign and needs help, come talk to me after the panel.
You can join Women of Color Unite. It's free. Everything we do is free. We got 6,000 members. We have events coming up on August 22nd. My organization would not exist without my mother passing away. She was my greatest inspiration, and I was her caretaker. So on August 22nd, we are having a day of taking care of women of color caretakers in entertainment. Because of the fact that we have to deal with like long hours on set, it's not like just a 9 to 5 job. We have to go on locations. So we are having a day of wellness. It is all day. It is completely free. We're starting off with some yoga, and then Soho Works is going to have some breakfast. We're going to have stations of like a massage therapist, hypnotherapy, nails, all of that. Then a speaker. Wait, I'm almost done. Then a speaker. Then we're having lunch, Jamaican. Number one, okay, I got to tell you guys this. Number one appetizer now in Los Angeles is a woman who does pop up. She does jerk chicken egg rolls. I swear to God, it's like crack. It is like crack. It is like crack. Anyway, she's going to be catering it. Then we're having a panel. I'm having my other moderator is going to be Bhavani Rao from South Asian Women in Entertainment because she took care of her mother. And then we're going to have my friend Dr. Allie come in. We're going to do some journaling, and then we're going to with a few cocktails. So it is a day of wellness at Soho Works. You can hit me up if you are a women of color caretaker for anyone from the elderly, somebody with a disability, all of a sudden, a kid was dropped on your lap, whatever it is, come with us. We have space for about 40 women. Come be in community and enjoy a day of wellness.
Yeah. All right. Anything else?
Sure, I'll just plug Alliance of Women Directors
away.
one more time. We obviously are an organization that exists to serve women and non-binary directors, but we also, like I mentioned, have ally membership. And ally membership is open to anyone of any gender, of any job. So please come join us and support the power of women in film. Thank you. Alliance of Women Directors.
Cinefem, you can find us on the web. So with our fiscal sponsorship program, we actually have a slate of 5 films this year that we're taking out, 2 pilots, 2 shorts, and a feature. All of them are made by women representing themselves. We have a woman who stars and written in the first double mastectomy revelation of an actress on screen. So anyway, if you are interested, we love to take women to their first feature to help shorts directors. If you have your project and you want to help with it, just get in touch on our website, and I'd be happy to talk to you. I'm really just with Cinefem very devoted, and I love and I just believe in women so much. I think that we can really achieve great things when individual artists, especially, are given, just free reign to get their shit made, right?
And can I say shout out to you, because we started our fiscal sponsorship and I was like, where do I begin? Oh yeah, let me hit up Michelle Cantor. So we also do fiscal sponsorship. I'm not going to say took it a step further, but we did something else. So we started a nonprofit production company. It's taken us 2 years, a whole lot of money for attorneys, but now, because there's nothing like it on the scale of which we can do it in the US, in Canada, yes, Australia, UK, anywhere else that they get public funding for it. So actually, we now have Woke You Productions, Women of Color Unite Productions, and it is a full-fledged nonprofit production company.
Thank you, ladies. And thank you for showing up. And please, happy movie watching. Yes. This concludes a day of panels. We're the last one.
Thank you so much, everybody. Like they said, that's the last panel. We will have a cocktail reception here from 7 to 9. But if I can ask you guys to step back out to the patio one more time, we're going to take out all the chairs and get some beers on ice so you guys can come back in at 7. Thank you so much.